All right, so the reason why I wanted you here today is I've been following very closely what's happening in Venezuela and bordering countries as well. And you hear a lot of things in the news,
Yep.
you know, and I'm like, okay, I'll take that with a grain of salt. So I
Yeah.
want to hear from the horse's mouth. And
Sure.
thank you for coming in and talking with us. And like, just tell us, man. Well, first of all, what has been going on? Let's do a little bit of history.
Sure.
And then kind of like let's transition into where do you think it's going to happen, and how does crypto play a role into all this?
That's a great framework. So, I guess a bit of history. It's hard to summarize 20 years of communism or I guess a transformative process in the country in a few minutes, but I'll do my best. So, I think it's good to set the tone of how Venezuela was prior to Chavez.
Sure.
So prior to Chavez, which was in the early mid-90s, Venezuela was a country that did have inequality. There was a big divide between the haves and the have-nots. And there were two main ruling political parties that essentially were quasi, Republican and Democrats, where they would alternate the presidency. And there was two or three parties that would alternate the presidency. And they just, the Venezuelan people had become used to these. These were the three actors, all right? So around the mid-90s, Venezuela is going through some, there's inflation still. There's some, the economy is not doing so great. But, in the leading up to the 99 elections, Hugo Chavez, who was a military that at the time was in jail because he had tried to overtake or overthrow the presidents twice.
He tried to do a coup, yeah.
He tried twice to do a coup, failed. He had been thrown in jail. And in 98, he gets pardoned by the, at that time, outing president called Rafael Caldera. And this pardon, this release from jail, enables him to campaign for the upcoming presidential election. So he frames his campaign as 21st century socialism. And he starts talking to the people saying, we're going to create, a vast safety net of government programs that's going to allow you to get a better paycheck. It's going to give you more unemployment benefits, these kinds of things. It's going to create better health system.
Yeah.
So this concept of 21st century socialism, at first, he very deliberately sold it as a middle way for companies and people to work together and kind of build this new type of socialism. And the people that were in the sidelines, spectating the run out to the lead up to the elections, had already said, this guy is lying.
Sure.
How can you believe this guy is trying to overtake the government twice? He's just, lying out of every, inch of his body, and he's just trying to get the power. But his allure was such that he rallied a lot of people. He even created his own political party, which is the Venezuelan United Socialist Party. Called. And so this party has effectively become the leading political party in Venezuela over the last 20 years, and it didn't exist. So it's a pretty crazy phenomenon that he actually built this whole thing from the ground up. Now, when Chavez comes into power in 99, he wins by a majority vote. And the first thing he decides to do is he wants to rewrite the Constitution. So he already started showing that he wanted to flex his muscle.
And they have the power to do that.
Well, he had won with a majority, and there was a big momentum building behind him. And so he said, to kind of carry out my plan, I have to get these things done. And people were like, well, we already voted him in. I guess let's look at his proposed changes.
Yeah.
And at the time, still, the opposition party was heavily criticizing all these changes that were going to be made to the Constitution. But again, the momentum was such that people kind of wanted to give him this shot at building this 21st century socialism. So he changes the Constitution, and he changes, and this already starts showing you where he was going. So he changed our flag, changed the number of stars in the flag. He changed the direction of our national crest, the direction which the horse was facing, because the horse was facing right, and now the horse was going to face left. He changed the name of the country, and he changed the time zone.
Was he always a Marxist, though?
The people that knew him from before knew that, or said that he was always a Marxist.
Yeah.
The people that were new to Chavez didn't really know him.
Yeah.
So they didn't know to look back and be scared of these things. So the changes to the Constitution go through, and people already start feeling like, oh wow, this guy came in. The first thing he did is started, doing all these really crazy things to kind of try to show his power. But then things got worse because Venezuela, being a I would say 90% dependent on oil, saw its oil export revenues 10x. over the 6 months that the first 6 months that he was in office. So he took office, I believe, at $17 a barrel.
And he nationalized everything.
It was already nationalized. So that's a misconception. I think people think that Chavez nationalized oil in Venezuela. The Venezuelan oil had always been nationalized in the 70s. Well, it became nationalized in the 70s. So when Chavez basically takes power, makes these changes to the assembly, and the country's revenue 10x's.
Yeah.
And so he starts getting this, this kind of, I don't even know how to call it, but it's this air of invincibility, right? Like he's got 10 times the budget now. He's got popular support, and all of the people that are opposing him, he's very quickly able to fix anything that gets pointed out by throwing money at it.
Sure.
It's like, oh, hospitals don't have medicine. Bring in the best, hospital beds and revamp the whole thing.
Sure.
Oh, we're having power outages. Fly in 2 power generators from Houston and park them in and make power go back on. And so people were like, oh my God, this guy is, socialism is really working. But and that already starts poisoning the minds of people because they start linking the increased revenue to socialism. And so it starts getting worse. So then he decides that, so people get upset for, let's put an example that was common in Venezuela, beef. People say, oh, with all this socialism, really wish we could afford more beef. Beef is still very expensive in Venezuela. So Chavez goes in and says, oh, beef is, going at $10 a pound. That's ridiculous. I've gone through the numbers of production in Venezuela, and this beef should be selling at $2 a pound. And the producers would all come as a group and say, we can't. There's no feasible way we can produce this. And he said, no, there is. And if you can't do it, I'll just expropriate your farm, and I'll do it myself. And the guys, the producers were like, A, they're not going to get fair pricing if it expropriates. Sure. B, they're going to lose money if they continue operating. So there was a bit of a stalemate, but eventually the guys were like, take it over, man. Yeah. I'm not going to lose more money. Take it over. So Chavez says, no problem, I take it over. And then to show people that they could, quote unquote, run these and still maintain the levels of production that people were used to, they started flying in beef because they had all these dollars coming in from oil. So they start flying in beef from Argentina, Texas, wherever it needs to get from, and they subsidize it so that it's priced at the cost he said it would be.
$2, yeah.
And so now you have, a socialist guy who has taken production from the hands of the capitalist thieves that were running these things, and now all of a sudden has made it so that everything appears on the shelves and it's really, really cheap. So that happened with beef, then it happened with rice, then it happened with beans. Slowly but surely, the state took over the vast majority of all effective production means in Venezuela. But not only were they doing this, whenever they took over a factory, they would take out trained engineers, managers, guys that were coming in, and they would put in his cousin, his friend, Militar Rodriguez, guy
I'm glad you brought that up. I think one thing that irritates me my parents come from former Yugoslavia, socialist country, so we have exactly the same shit. My grandparents left, they stole our company, and see you later. People think that money alone or having the ability to run the company is success. Is like, it's so easy for capitalists. It's like, you have money. I'm like, are we living in like parallel universes? If it's that easy, everyone could do it. And so all the intellectual capital, human beings being the most important commodity, what do they say? Fuck off.
I'm out.
And
that creates the biggest problem, which is in an authoritarian regime, brain drain starts happening, but brain drains start happening from the top down.
Yeah.
So you lose your most qualified and that is the most painful thing for a country to endure, because as things start getting heated, the guys that see the signs are usually the most educated, the guys that have experienced a few things and have the luxury or can afford to question strategically where the country's going. Most people tie it on a day-to-day. They don't even get to peek their head up and see where this is going. They just keep chugging. So the brain drain that starts when that happens is huge, because now you have the factory owners are leaving, the best employees are leaving,
everyone that has anyone that has like a very, I would say, common sense to see what's going on, like, I'm gone.
So, but now the flip side to that is that is precisely the reason why brain drain at the beginning is not a problem for the neighboring countries.
No.
actually most people benefit.
Yes.
Most of the neighboring countries start benefiting from this brain drain. So there's this weird moment in this, decomposing.
So where did they go? They went to like.
The first desired destination for most Venezuelan immigrants is Miami, Florida.
Of course.
The second most is Madrid.
Okay, Madrid, yeah.
Madrid, yeah, because it's Spanish, no
Spanish,
language
yeah,
barrier,
yeah.
And the communities themselves start getting gravity because the more Venezuelans are in a place, the more opportunity.
Well,
the more
Miami is
everything.
pretty much, if you don't speak Spanish, you're fucked.
Yes. So in Miami there was a lot of Cubans there already. We went through a lot of the same.
Yeah.
So there was a bit of a almost like a pre-made home.
Yeah.
For Venezuelans, and they, in Miami, the Miami community was very
Opening.
They welcomed them, I guess, with open arms, and now the Venezuelans have in fact taken over parts of Miami, like Doral.
Really?
Doral is like fully Venezuelan.
Wow.
Weston, which is a city just north of Florida, or north of Miami, is also.
So when did they start leaving? Like early 2000s, or?
So we left. My family is an interesting concept. An interesting story. The Chavez took office in '99.
Okay.
We left in 2000.
2000.
But we only left for 2 years to Miami.
Okay.
And I think that actually illustrates the thoughts that a lot of Venezuelans had at the time. Was like, oh, Chavez came in, let's take a 2-year or 5-year vacation until he goes out of power.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll go back and continue doing our business. So some Venezuelans at first were like, okay, well, let's wait this out. Let's wait till this guy, runs out of steam and runs out of money.
Sure.
But the problem is oil just kept chucking
Rising,
up. And he, very smartly, with his oil money, started financing, like-minded presidents around him. And so Chavez effectively set up his communist, I call it a communist franchise, because it was exactly the same, cookie-cut concept and offerings to the people. And so he first sets it up. I don't know exactly the order in which it happened, but Ecuador goes red, Argentina goes red, Brazil goes red, Bolivia goes red.
Yes.
Nicaragua was already red, but you saw this like phenomenon of.
He did it what Che Guevara wanted to do.
Well, these guys are I hate to sound a little bit outlandish, but these guys are monsters.
They're sociopaths.
They put like idealists before human rights almost, and they just get drunk on this idea that they're right. And that they're doing the world a greater good without really thinking of what they're actually doing. So it's really scary.
I always say there's a red alarm when you meet somebody that says, I have a solution for people and I'm going to implement through a means of force to implement my better solution.
Yeah.
That should be like your number one red alarm.
Yeah. I don't know where I read this quote, but it was a society that puts equality above freedom is doomed for mediocrity.
Milton Friedman.
Yeah. It's something like, I don't know.
That's on my Facebook profile.
Oh, well, there it is. That's
like my banner.
So there it is. So like I think largely that's why the United States has continued to maintain its liberties because they almost are allergic to social.
That's the Constitution. They're the two things that keep them in line. It's a republic as opposed to democracy, and they have in the Constitution freedom of speech, regardless if you like what a person's saying or not. And the right to bear arms.
Right. Well, the right to bear arms is an interesting one. Venezuela is a very, gun-friendly community or society, and I think some of the theory behind owning a weapon or protecting yourself is that, the society at large will come together in arms and stop the big bully government from doing all the bad things.
Sure.
I think that's a great idea. But having seen what happens in Venezuela, there's just not. Venezuela, a lot of people have weapons. Like it's widely held. It's not really about the weapons. It's about the ability to organize.
Yeah, that's the problem.
And I think governments are very good at shooting down the ability to organize. So it doesn't matter really how many guns you have if they're not talking to each other and doing a coordinated attack. It's
do they have a black switch for internet down there?
Yeah, and they've used it recently. There's hard evidence showing they've been phishing information. So the Venezuela regime has been using Venezuela. The way they ensure that products are cheap for people is by controlling the supply of those products, and they do this with the internet. They do this with power. They do this with water, like basic services. And the subsidized internet service that they provide feeds approximately, I think it's like 70% of all internet or all devices. And because they control the ISP, they control what the ISP shows. So there's evidence of them phishing in Venezuela, like phishing for information on Gmail, so they can take your login, phishing for your Twitter information. Like they'll actually spoof the landing page and fish for your information. There's actual hard evidence. I just tweeted this yesterday from a couple of researchers in Venezuela. And more recently, which is like, these guys are sorry to say that, but they're vicious. They're vile. In this recent bid for Venezuela, and the new Venezuelan president Juan Guaidó is rallying volunteers to sign up to basically aid in the allowing of the humanitarian aid to enter through the borders. So they put up this website so that you can sign up as a volunteer. Hundreds of thousands of people have signed up already, and they've actually spoofed the landing page internally in Venezuela so that they can get all the personal details of the people that are trying to sign up for this volunteers page.
And these are volunteers in Venezuela.
In Venezuela. And so the Chavez regime has gone as far as actually, so one of the attempts that was done to show the amount of discontent that there was in the country towards Chavez was this list. The opposition at a time started collecting signatures for people that were requesting for presidential referendum. And this list got very big. I can't remember exactly how many people it was, but I think it was in the order of 40,000 people. And this list was, on the premise that the names are going to be kept privately because it's huge privacy concerns. Nobody should know who you vote for or where your political inclination is. Venezuelan government, of course, took it and used it for political means. So it was an open secret. There was no clear guidelines, but if you had signed on that list, you were never going to get approved for any, loans from the government banks, any, government issued travel cards for using.
That's their version of like the Chinese social credit system.
So and now the scariest part is this thing has morphed now into a system called the Fatherland Card.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard about this.
No, not yet.
So the Fatherland Card is this crazy state control experiment. It's being powered by Huawei technology. No, it's just a fact. You can go fact check this. So Huawei has helped the Venezuelan government produce these cards. And they call them the Fatherland cards.
Yeah.
And they're trying to make them a replacement for the Venezuelan ID system called the cédula that's been standing for decades. But they're now trying to replace this. And it is a Fatherland card that essentially is a political affiliation card. Like you only have this Fatherland card if you are with the United Socialist Party of Venezuela. And you have to line up and go to all of these events to get all these subsidies. So this card tracks where you live, where you work, how many cars you own, if your house is rented, how many benefit programs are you using monthly, how many kids you have, where they go to school, and it has now a real-time location chip that Huawei is tracking, so that when they need you to go vote, they'll know exactly where to pinpoint you. They'll go pick you up and take you. And so this card, if you don't have access to this card,
you're a second-class citizen.
You're a second-class citizen. You have no access to gasoline. You have no access to loans. You have no access to subsidized food. You have no access to subsidized service at hospitals. And so your only way to get these benefits is by creating this, and then they use the sign-up numbers on this Fatherland card as a political, we have this many million families that our party is helping.
That's crazy.
And these services won't be happening under any other government. And so they're a terrorist state.
So what's happening right now with Maduro and everything?
Maduro's a crook.
Yeah.
I've told you this. It's my opinion, right? I speak from my experience there. These guys are not politicians. They're not diplomats. These guys have held not a single one of their, of the alleged things that they said they were going to commit to. There's been attempts at negotiations before between the opposition and Maduro, and all the requests that have been made by the opposition have been ignored. None of the timelines or commitments have been honored by the Maduro regime.
But what do you think it's going to take, though, to bring back, let's say, some form of a democratic vote?
My very personal view is that Maduro is being held in power by a group of, I would say, no more than a couple hundred generals
Yeah.
that are not themselves the guys with the guns.
Yeah.
They are the guys at the top. Were awarded. Yeah. So these guys are not willing to fight for Maduro.
Yeah.
However, they know that if Maduro leaves, they go to jail.
They go to jail, yeah.
Or they have to leave with him. And it's easy for a head of state to negotiate amnesty, not so much for these guys.
Military, yeah.
Right? So Maduro is basically being held in the country by these weapons because they say, if you leave, you're as good as dead because we're done and we're not going to let you just walk away.
Yeah.
Right? So that's one. The second piece is the lower ranking officers, the guys with the guns, they are hungry. They are not getting their medicine. They're not getting paid on time. So they have no political allegiance. They are, in fact, I would dare say, a vast majority of the lower ranking officers are already just waiting for leadership to emerge within the military ranks so they can just switch sides. However, nobody wants to be the first guy out of the gate because there have been documented events where uprising military personnel gets murdered while openly surrendering, like Oscar Perez. He put it up on Instagram. He was actively surrendering.
Yeah, I heard about that.
They wouldn't stop shooting at him. They murdered him, a bunch of kids, and a bunch of women that were with him on the camp. This is fact. International community doesn't matter because they drown all the media. All we get is social media, and social media, as you know, anyone that's witnessed a bot network attack can tell you, it's almost as easy to put fake news on social media as it is.
Is there a media agency or company or syndicate that you would recommend for people to watch or get information from?
There are, in English, Human Rights Foundation is really good.
Okay.
Alex Gladstein does a great job.
Gladstein, yeah.
So I connected with him. He's a really great guy doing a lot of great work. They put out some very interesting research. CSIS puts out some really good.
CSIS here?
CSIS.
The organization?
Yeah, I believe it's CSIS.
Yeah, it's Canadian CSIS.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if it's CSIS. I'll put it on the show notes.
Okay.
I'll send them to you. But there are a few links in English that are very good. In Spanish, there's a very good YouTube network called Venezolanos por la Información, and it's VPI.
VPI, okay.
And they're an independent network. They're a YouTube channel. Obviously, Maduro has taken out any mass media that doesn't only speak favorably about him off grid. So the only way to get not government news is through
independent.
Through YouTube or social media, because they have dismantled all of the all of the broad-reaching narrative is controlled entirely by them.
So this brings me to a really important question is, because I know you're working on really interesting solutions right now. How does Bitcoin and crypto fit into all of this?
Yeah, there's good and bad, and you have to we don't really know when the markets are controlled by the market in Venezuela. Well, I guess let's start from the beginning. Venezuela has had currency controls for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
So over the last 20 years, it's been illegal for Venezuela to buy dollars from anyone other than the government. Now, the government has used an artificially low exchange rate for a couple of reasons. One, it helps them say that their numbers in dollar terms are better to humanitarian organizations. So if I am the government and I say that the exchange rate is 2 bolivares per dollar and a person minimum wage is 1,000 bolivares, you're making $500 a month. But if the actual real exchange rate of that bolivar is 100, you're actually making $5. But no one actually does everybody just says, okay, what's the official exchange rate? Oh, whatever the government says. And then that's what gets queued into all these formulas.
Yeah.
So for one, that, and two, the other purpose of that is to reward allegiance to the government. So for example, if I am an importer of beef, right, and I need to bring in a pound of beef, that is being sold at $10 a pound. If I were to acquire those $10 in the black market at $100, 100 bolivares per dollar, I'd have to spend 1,000 bolivares to get that pound of beef. But if I'm a friend of Maduro and they approve $10 at the 2 bolivares per dollar exchange rate, I now can buy that beef for 20 bolivares. The same beef that cost 1,000.
Yeah.
So what happens is I buy it at 20, I bring it into the country, and I sell it in the black market for 700 bolivares. And then I use those 700 bolivares, multiply it times 2, and I have 350. So this it was a virtuous cycle where he would reward only his friends. So only his friends were the importers. And so if you were an importer in the Maduro era, you're rich out of your wildest dreams. Like, you don't know what to do with your money.
And I saw a picture of Maduro eating like a $300 steak.
With Nasserit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, people are fucking hungry.
So the interesting part about this is that works great until you're out of oil money.
Yeah.
Because
you can rob Peter until Peter's broke.
Exactly. So when oil starts collapsing, a couple of things started coming together all at once in the Venezuelan government. So first of all, Chavez died.
Yes.
Chavez dies in 2014. A lot of people even then thought Chavez was the only thing keeping the lid on social change, because there was just no way that they were going to keep it together without Chavez. And myself and many others thought that that was going to be it for Chavismo. We were done, and the country was going to turn around. A lot of us went. It was a historic vote. The night of the vote, the elections results came out when a very, very, very questioned results. Maduro won by like 0.5% or something like that. Everybody felt those elections were rigged. And there were large demonstrations right after that election happened. And the opposition, there were, I would say almost hundreds of thousands at least, I would put it in the millions of people out on the streets, like really enraged that they had been, robbed an election, and now it was going to be 5 more years of this disaster. The leader at the time was a guy called Enrique Capriles, and he made the call after 3 days of protests to say, we're going to concede. Because I guess he was trying to negotiate with these guys to get them to accept that a recount at least, but they wouldn't. And Capriles at the time made the decision that said, this is going to end in civil war. I'm just going to concede. And I'm not going to have this on me. At the time, and I still feel those elections were rigged, and had he made the call to go out and take the streets, we'd probably be in a different Venezuela. But that was not what happened. So Chavez dies. Maduro is sworn in again for another 6 years. The country is kind of bracing itself for another 5 years of shit. So as this is happening, the first few pioneers start discovering Bitcoin. Around 2014, 2015 is when, mining, some people, different hubs of people across the country start finding out about mining. They put 2 and 2 together. They're like, okay, heavily subsidized hydro. I'm getting this internet money. My costs are artificially lower than the rest of the world. And I can now monetize this subsidy and earning an income in hard money. So that's like the first light bulb starts going off. So the first few guys that did it, I would say there was about 10 of us, groups in different cities that started. Out of the 10, I would probably say 7 or 8 were incredibly secretive about their operations. They didn't want anyone to know. They didn't want it. And few other groups and ourselves were more of an open book because we were just more excited about it. And we kind of saw it as, hey, we want to help you guys do the same. And we helped a bunch of people get set up, like hundreds. And you would see the light bulb go off every time you would explain it. You're like, so here's your computer. You're going to earn this Bitcoin. This Bitcoin is worth dollars, and it's actually increasing its value in dollar terms. So you're actually saving, and they are, if they felt like they were entering this world of, this mixed of Ready Player One with, this Wall Street, where they were like, they couldn't immediately now they were connected to this new global system, and their wealth was growing, and it was great to see. We saw guys that had depreciating assets like a car. They were doing taxi runs. They were making, $100 a month after everything, and the car had wear and tear. So, we would explain to the guys, hey, you're making $100 now. If your tire goes flat, how are you going to replace the tire?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I don't know. We're like, well, if you sell this car for $3,000, you can buy one S9 or two S9s, and off you go. You're making $600 a month.
Yeah.
So, and you don't have an depreciating asset, and you don't take the risk of getting strangers in your car. And the light bulb.
Light bulb. Yeah.
Light bulb. Sell the car, get the miners. Guy moved to Argentina like a month later, still lives from money from the miners. We're like, so after you see that, you're like, man, every person that comes your way, you're like, you sell whatever you have, mine.
Yeah.
And that worked really well in Venezuela. So for a couple of years, we kind of really helped people, and we were able to scale ourselves, growing our operations. We grew, when we tapped out a facility, we went to another one. And so, but eventually we hit to a point where we said, okay, this is changing the world. This isn't just happening here. This is happening everywhere else. So what can we do that is going to be a benefit in addition to this, how can we help this system? How can we help people save more? How can we help people, keep their Bitcoin for a longer time?
Sure.
And so the idea for Ledin really came from that, which is if you work so hard to earn a hard asset in those countries, and your mom goes sick or something happens where you need a short-term cash need, that actually is your highest quality asset and your most liquid. So you end up sacrificing it and you buy it. And there's a lot of friction coming out of Bitcoin in Venezuela. So it is a very unfortunate event to happen to someone that's worked so hard to save. So the idea with Ledin was, okay, first we're going to create a Bitcoin-backed loan that we can offer North American rates of credit. So 12% is our current rates, which is relative to international credit available is I think incredibly competitive. And so for 1% a month, that person can take the money they need and essentially pay it back and keep their Bitcoin. And if Bitcoin went up 10% during their loan, it's their gain.
And they're getting the greenback, USD currency.
Yeah, and so that is not we don't put him in this Forex race.
So how would it work? So I would collateralize it with Bitcoin?
Yeah.
And it would be like a wire transfer? Or
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And it depends, right? So like some of the things that are interesting about international loans is, how do you get people dollars? Some people have dollar accounts.
Yes.
That's no problem. Some people don't. So they prefer to get it sent through like networks such as AirTM or other ways
like
where you
physical
can get
kiosks to get cash.
You can get virtual dollars delivered. So that distribution is something that we're thinking right now we do US dollars, but we're
What would you say the number one use case right now is for the loans?
In Canada, it largely has been Bitcoin entrepreneurs, and people that own Bitcoin businesses or mining operations, etc. Guys that have had Bitcoin for a long time, they probably held it from 1 to 20, now it's at 3. They don't really want to sell it. And they believe that it may, that it will turn back around. So they get the liquidity they need today, they invest in their business, and the cost of carrying the loan is in their view and ours, lower than the potential benefit from that Bitcoin. And then the other product that we're most excited about right now is the deposit account, essentially, an ability for people to earn interest on their Bitcoin. And that I think is going to be a very meaningful product for Latin America, because in Latin America, Bitcoin is becoming more and more a part of your savings portfolio for retirement, because the way I see Bitcoin for people in emerging countries is that it is now a higher quality asset even than their own homes, because it now competes for financing from companies in North America, which is something that none of their other asset classes have. A Venezuelan car will only compete for Venezuelan funding. A Venezuelan home will only compete for Venezuelan credit.
Yeah.
A Bitcoin is a Bitcoin. It doesn't matter where it is. So it actually gets the entire modern world competing to finance that loan. And so I believe the Bitcoin is going to continue to rank higher and higher as far as quality in those portfolios, and people are going to start going overweight more and more on that asset.
And looking at like the local Bitcoin volume, would you say that's pretty accurate? What's happening with the total volume in Venezuela right now?
I would, and I would say that there was a really cool paper on Twitter making the rounds that showed local Bitcoin volume relative to income per capita, and also including a degree of authoritarianism in that country. And what it depicts really is that local Bitcoins works best in countries that don't have authorized on and off ramps. And those countries tend to be authoritarian, heavily controlled currency markets.
Yes.
And if you look at the local Bitcoin volumes and you look at the map, and it blows up in red in countries like Venezuela and China and Iran, that are the countries that have ridiculous controls for people to move their wealth and restrictions. And they are, they don't have legal on and off ramps.
Yeah.
So people still find their way to get their Bitcoin. And so local Bitcoin volume just hit its record peak last week. It was at 2485 Bitcoin traded in 1 week.
Wow.
So that's roughly about 8.5 million US.
Wow.
So just over $1 million a day in trading volume in a country where the average person makes $1 a week.
That's crazy.
So my guess, along with others in the space, is that the Venezuelan government has been target of a lot of sanctions right now, and they're suffering from a lot of restrictions on their US dollar denominated accounts. So I have the feeling, as well as others, that they are printing cash and dumping it in the P2P market to get Bitcoin.
Interesting.
And interestingly,
Meaning the government?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the red herring that I've been tracking to come to this conclusion is $1 worth of Bitcoin generally trades at a small discount to $1.
Yes.
Because there tends to be some friction to getting in and out of Bitcoin.
Yes.
In Venezuela, this has normally been the case, except starting April of last year,
Okay.
another site, and then myself, prompted by that and a couple other things, started tracking this, the parity between $1 worth of Bitcoin and $1. And the waves of the premium comes in waves. So like there are moments in time where $1 worth of Bitcoin will be trading at 30-40% premium to $1.
Really?
Yeah. And I've seen that premium go as high as 70%.
Wow.
And what that in my view, what that means is that there is a disproportionate demand to acquire these Bitcoins relative to dollars. And people are just, deciding to pay 30 or 40% more just to get that value in Bitcoin and not in dollars because of the censorship resistance aspect of it. And frankly, I think it's because there is no demand for dollars because they're so sanctioned that even once they get them, they can't move them around.
Yeah.
And so my take is that, the general public, it's not that they're being none the wiser, it's that they're making a premium on that arbitrage spread, right? So the people ask, where are the Bitcoins continue to come? Who is selling the Bitcoin in Venezuela?
Sure.
And if I'm a person in Venezuela that can sell a Bitcoin in the open market at a 40-50% premium to $1, then get those bolivares, turn them into dollars, send it to my Kraken account and buy it again.
Yes.
I'm going to do that all day.
Yeah, you're arbitraging all day long.
And proxy, by doing that, you are inadvertently laundering that Bitcoin for the Venezuelan government.
Yeah.
So the Venezuelan government gets its way, not without enriching some privates in the process.
Sure.
But if you play that, it feels like it's working against the Venezuelan people today. But if you play that down the run enough, what happens when you do that is when you're printing an organic fiat just for the purpose of acquiring assets, your fiat will get to a tipping point where nobody will want it anymore. So right now in Venezuela, the most common way of paying something is a US credit card. So you'll go and you'll swipe your Bank of America card to pay for a burger.
Yeah.
You'll send a Zelle transfer.
And nobody wants the Boulevard. Nobody. Nobody.
It's a hot potato right now.
Yeah.
And so it seems like it's working or it's dealing a shitty hand to this government, to the people today. But I think we are in the early stages of like a type of hyperinflation that we have never seen. Because the hyperinflation that we've seen to date, which was just 1,000,000% over the last year, they could still trade over the last year. They could still transact with one or two countries.
Sure.
From this year on, all they can do is print to acquire, in a bid to acquire local assets that are still being sold.
Didn't they also do like their fucking ICO, the petrodollar?
The petro, my man.
Yeah. What the fuck was
the
that?
petro. I have my own my own personal view about what the petro was. So, I mean, sometimes I say when I'm talking about Venezuela, I have to catch myself because it's actually hard to, when I'm speaking, when I'm telling it, it sounds like surreal because it sounds like something that people wouldn't actually do. But And it's scary because it's actually, all of this is true. And I say this because I think the petro came at a very funny time. The petro came at around Christmas 2017.
Yes.
Right? And that was peak ICO,
Peak crazy.
Peak crazy,
Yeah.
right? Peak everything. But if you are an observer of Venezuelan history, the Chavismo regime, Maduro and Chavez, had gotten in this habit of gifting things to the Venezuelan people in December to keep votes and just to keep popularity. So this started with this event called the Dacaso, which I believe was Christmas 2015.
Okay.
So Christmas 2015, there's some discontent growing. Maduro had just won the elections. People were like really upset.
Yep.
And there was just a lot of discontent on the streets. So what Maduro does around Christmas, he goes to the biggest electronics store in the country, which, you know, the equivalent of Best Buy.
Sure.
And he says, all of your inventory is mispriced. You're using the black market dollar rates. Where the government of Venezuela is seizing your inventory and selling it at the official rate, which is essentially 80% off.
Wow.
Or 90% off. Of course, the people of Venezuela, new TV,
Yeah.
new fridge,
Well, thank you.
new
thank
everything.
you.
For
Yeah.
nothing. Maduro,
Yeah.
the greatest. So next Christmas comes around. And then the same thing, discontent on the streets.
Yeah,
People are
yeah.
mad. Maduro's like, guess what, guys? I'm going to bring you all a leg of ham. Every family that is joined in this home fatherland program gets a beautiful Christmas dinner.
Yeah.
And they went, and then along with that, they went into a few shoe stores, and they did the same 80%. And so, oh my God, lo and behold, everybody got a bonus. People are happy. Okay, again.
Sure.
Christmas 2017 came. The electronics companies weren't bringing stock around Christmas. The shoes companies weren't bringing stock around Christmas. Everybody knew that they were just going to be the next ones on the chopping block, so nobody brought anything.
Yeah.
So everybody's kind of sitting there, right? But who was bringing a lot of things over 2017? Bitcoin miners. So we had brought in, not we, as a group, all of us had invested millions of dollars in mining equipment, and it was plugged in Venezuela.
Like full ASICs.
Full ASICs, earning dollars. And so as 2017 is unfolding and everybody's like, Bitcoin, 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 ICO, 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 these guys get word that, hey, not only can you use Bitcoin to overcome these ridiculous sanctions, you have all these guys that have brought in all these dollar-producing machines, and you have no law for it. So you can just go take it.
Yeah.
You can just go take it. Covertly, overtly, matters little. There's no law in Venezuela.
Yes.
At least the only law is whatever they decide. And so the Petro starts as a campaign to say Venezuela is going to raise Bitcoin and screw you sanctions and screw you SWIFT and banking system. We are going to get our money through Bitcoin, and your empire can have its own. Like, we don't care about what your empire does. The Petro obviously failed. Nobody believes or trusts the Venezuelan government, and nobody was stupid enough, thankfully, to give them $1 in exchange for a dumb coin. But what the Petro did do was that as they were promoting the Petro, they basically informed the Venezuelan society at large
of crypto
that they're like, these machines make dollars.
Yeah.
This is what they look like. This is what they sound like. This is how much they make a day. So hey, you were looking for a Christmas bonus?
Yeah.
You found them. Go get them. And so all of us miners, out of the blue, start getting calls from the government service agents, start getting visits from the electricity company, and they're basically, at first they start as like polite,
they're trying to be friends.
what are you doing, right? Then we start hearing words, we start hearing about guys that, they start sending like armed brigades and like knocking down doors and being like, you guys are financing terrorism, we're gonna take you to jail, we need $20,000 or you're going to jail, all your machines are gone. Because like, whoa, like here's 20K, let me be, I don't want none of this. Then they go on to the next guy. And then they're like, 20K, blah, blah, blah. Oh, guess what? Give me 20K and I'm gonna own half of your facility. If you want no one of us to come fuck with you again.
Yeah.
And so they do that, and effectively the military crooks, either by force or by forced partnerships start acquiring his equipment. This happened to us. So Christmas 2017, Brigade knocks down on my brother's mining facility, threatens him of taking him to jail, demands $15,000 in cash to not take him to jail. We, of course, denied because we had imported all of our machines legally and everything. We had registered everything legally. So we said, we're not at fault here. We're doing a legitimate activity. We're not going to give you $15,000. And they're like, great, you're going to jail. We're like, well, no, like, there's got to be due process. They're like, we are the due process. You give us $15,000 or you go to jail. And my brother's like, man, like, so we start calling people to see if we can get some help.
Sure.
But the responses were, it's coming from higher up. It's coming from above. It's coming from above.
Yeah.
My brother picks up his 2 kids and his wife, drives to the Colombian border with a bunch of cash, starts paying off the people as he goes through the border, gets out of the country, haven't returned since.
Is he safe now?
He's in Madrid.
Okay, that's good.
My 2 brothers have done like an ATM network around Spain, which is like Bitcoin again has enabled a lot of Venezuelans to not only migrate with their wealth, but reestablish themselves around the knowledge they already formed. So like myself and my brothers, we leveraged everything we learned about Bitcoin during our years in Venezuela for our businesses today. So it's like a legit, it's happening, so the Petro was really this almost a marketing effort so that the lower ranking officers could get low hanging fruit and keep the ranks to some degree, at bay. And it happened, and it actually is working because today most of the mining facilities, again, this is hard to prove because there's no hard data. All I have is anecdotal evidence. But my sense is that at least 60 to 70%, if not higher, of all of the large mining operations in Venezuela, and by large I mean 20 plus machines, are partially owned by a crooked official.
That wouldn't surprise me. Same thing with the mining. The mining rigs in China, they have to be government owned.
Yeah.
They have to be.
Yeah. And the funny part is there's rolling blackouts in Venezuela. Venezuela actually has a power shortage.
Really?
Yeah. But these guys control...
Where's the majority of the power? Water-based?
Water-based, hydro,
Yeah.
The really bad part is these guys actually have to assign rolling blackouts to parts of the country. And they've assigned rolling blackouts to parts of the countries that have hospitals and things, but not where their operations are.
Yeah, of course not.
So, it's hard because you feel as a Venezuelan that you're constantly like just screaming the alarms of all these terrible things that are happening. But it's almost like if it's not coming from a stamp on a TV and a talking head, it's like people say you're exaggerating. You're just an imperialist, you're just like a dog of Donald. And I'm like, dude, like that's the last thing we want to be. We're trying to show you that there are criminals right now literally setting innocent people back. And there is nothing we as an innocent or as a law-abiding Venezuelan can do to change this condition.
Is there any? I know because right now there's talks of a new prime minister or president that wants to come in.
Juan Guaido.
Yeah, Juan Guaido. What do you believe is the outcome in the next couple of years for Venezuela?
So I mean, I don't think it's going to be a friendly negotiation.
Okay.
I don't think Maduro and his crew are diplomats, like I was mentioning. I would like to believe in a happy, this is what's best for the country, here's your amnesty, let us take over. I don't think that's going to happen. I think my guess would be that, as I mentioned to you earlier, I think what's supporting Maduro is just 100 or maybe a couple hundred officials. None of the guys are actually going to be doing the shooting or the fighting.
Yes.
So those guys feel that they can control their ranks really well right now, based on the incentives and threats to hurt their families and stuff if they turn. So right now, they feel like they still have a grip on those people. I think what it takes to break that is for that regime to feel like they're not the only ones with weapons in the country. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
And for that to happen, I think you're going to see the way I think things might unfold is humanitarian aid hits the border. Venezuela actually takes up the mask and brings tanks and people and actually shows the criminals and animals that they are.
Yep.
And that the international community is like, wow, these guys actually brought guns to point it at food. And then they're like, okay, we can't just send trucks without guns because they're just going to shoot them like they've been shooting innocent people inside Venezuela. And so I think there needs to be political will from the international community to bring in an international military convoy just to protect. I'm not saying enter shooting, asking questions later. We should have a convoy that ensures that the food gets through. Because right now you have the rightfully elected president requesting the food to come in. And you have a group of armed thugs blocking that entrance. The international community, if we're going on this path that we recognize Guaido, should treat those guys at the border as insurgents and shoot them down. I mean, that's what I would do. I mean, if there are insurgents that are preventing an international coalition of aid and medicine to enter a country, how do you politely remove them?
Do you think the United Nations will get involved, or?
I think they have to.
They have to, yeah.
I think they have to. I think the biggest block there is Russia and China.
Yeah.
But I think that Trump being Trump, China's going through a really hard economic time.
Yeah.
They lost their geopolitical allies in the region, like no Brazil anymore, no Argentina anymore, no Ecuador anymore. So what do they have? It's a very expensive fight for them right now. And I feel like Russia, I mean, my view is that US and Russia are kind of already made truce about this whole thing, and they're like, okay, we're gonna slowly start tweaking the narrative so that we don't look bad. So Russia, I think, is not that big a concern. China is going to be something that we have to work on.
Yeah.
But
China, like any nation, they just care about profit. So.
And what Guaido has been doing really smartly, which I commend him for, the lifelines for this regime have been Russia and China.
Yes.
That's it. There's nobody else that sent them any money. Cuba has just sucked in wealth. The only people that have actually thrown money or lifelines when they needed it was China and Russia. Guaido, like any Venezuelan aspiring president, should go meet with Putin. And what's the guy in China right now?
Chang, I forget his name.
Yeah. So anyway, you need to be requesting meetings with those guys.
Yeah.
And actually sit down with them as an investor and say, here's your portfolio in Venezuela. Here's what it's producing today.
Sure.
Here's what's going to happen if you continue with these douches. And here's what I can offer you. And I can offer you upwards and to the right.
Yeah.
You just have to get them to say yes. They care about money, like you very well said. They care little about anything else. Just make a business argument.
So you think Trump will actually intervene for some stuff? Because I know he's backing now.
Guaido.
Yeah.
I think they have to, man. I mean, I think they've gone. I mean, nobody has to do anything, but I would like them to. I equate the Venezuelan situation, and I've mentioned this before, but like I'll say it again because I think it's a good analogy. If you're walking by a house or you're walking by a street and you look into a house and you see that there's this big guy beating the crap out of a helpless woman with a bat, and this woman is like visibly beat, bleeding, no chance she's getting up. What do?
I go in there and I do my thing.
You go in there and you do your thing, right? There are some people that say, that's not your house. They need to figure it out by themselves. What private property, right? Like how, so in Venezuela right now.
The difference between though, like if you're comparing like especially with the States, they have, the historical context it matters. They've been intervening in South Latin America since the get-go.
Of course.
Putting their own despots in power and siphoning off the resources as much as possible. The IMF has been there for years and doing their most ridiculous loans possible.
There's no good presidents.
None.
I understand.
And so it's like, I think it's come to a point where intervention by means of military is not affordable, as in not profitable anymore.
Fair.
How do you create a system? This is what's so interesting. Like you said at the beginning, these thugs, they're not going to go down without a fight because it's a house of cards. Because if one person goes down, they all go down. So it's a cartel. Now, if you look at like one example of a country, he was fucked too. It was in Africa. It was Idi Amin.
Okay.
the general.
Okay.
He was a dictator, like ruthless dictator, killed millions. And they eventually kicked him out, but the only way they can kick him out properly, they made an asylum deal, and he left to Saudi Arabia and lived off with millions of dollars, even though he's a dictator. So I'm always trying to figure out ways of like, you always have to ask yourself, like, whether it's China, Russia, or United States, the only reason why they send military in is they make money. Like the whole idea of people thinking in like, people are doing things that are altruistic, like nation states, like you and I as individuals will do like altruistic things. I don't benefit at all, right? But nation states is like billions of dollars must be deployed to create those weaponaries, to deploy the soldiers. So the money has to be made.
Yeah, I listen, I wish it didn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
But I understand that's the name of the game. Frankly, I think Venezuela is a place that has so much potential for the international community at large. Venezuela is a place that has been sequestered by thugs from oil exploration. So most of the oil exploration that's been happening in Venezuela since the Chavez regime is non-existent.
Yeah.
There has been no research and development in the Venezuelan oil space for 20 years.
Yeah.
The numbers have been dropping since I can remember.
There might be one black swan event that fucks up Venezuelan oil prices is there's been talks of Saudi Aramco going public. The biggest fucking company in the world with the most oil reserves. You know why they want to go public too? Because the United States became the #1 supplier of oil through fracking. And so top barrel's super cheap now in the United States. So they're actually undercutting everybody in Saudi Arabia. So the Saudis, and that's the $1 trillion company, Aramco, not fucking Apple and all that.
Right.
They're like, well, shit, man, you know, like
We're
losing 75% of our profits right now. It's like, and the whole like scam of like, there's not enough oil. You need barrels. How many fucking barrels they're sitting on?
Yeah.
Ungodly amounts of barrels they're sitting on. So they're thinking of going public. One of the kings or princes said, we want to go public. Kind of do like the Walmart model.
Right. I mean, oil, I wish we weren't so dependent on oil. I think Venezuela has so much more to offer than just oil.
Sure.
That's one of my biggest problems is that, to start, Venezuela, Margarita Island doesn't have a Hilton anymore. Doesn't have a Marriott anymore.
And they left.
They left. But they did really well when they were there.
Of course.
So, like, for example, Air Canada.
Yeah.
Air Canada used to fly direct to Caracas.
Yeah.
It was a full flight. I took it dozens of times.
And our dollar was pretty good. It was super affordable down there.
There is an argument for a beneficial economic relationship with Venezuela.
Yeah.
There absolutely is, for every country. So right now, Venezuela is not a player in the global economy. That is to the detriment of everybody.
Yeah.
So it's hard because you have to, it's a concentrated expense with a distributed benefit, right? So nobody wants to be the person that makes that concentrated expense.
Yeah.
But I think that, to your point, people have to make money. And not losing money, in my books, is as good as making it.
Mm-hmm.
You know who's losing a lot of money? All the guys taking the refugees.
Mm-hmm.
You know how many people have left Venezuela in the last 2 years?
It's like 1 million plus.
4 million people.
4 million, wow.
No country in neighboring or around has the infrastructure to absorb
Colombia's
that
taking
much.
a lot of them right now too.
Colombia's taking a huge bunch. Brazil took another huge bunch. That's creating a lot of friction in the border towns. They don't have
animosity too and pressure.
They don't have the services to take on that many people. And so now it is their problem. It's costing them dearly to maintain this. So same with the US. You know how many asylum or refugee claims have come in from Venezuela in Miami alone?
Yeah.
Just in judge hours, the United States could probably send a convoy and it would be probably break even. So there is a real cost to the Venezuelan tragedy, like absolutely. And I think if you actually do the numbers, I would argue that it's probably a break even, if not positive, for a coalition to go in and take these guys out of there. But there has to be that will. And I think something that really helped, that hadn't happened until Trump took office, and one thing I am grateful to Trump for, is calling these guys what they are. Criminal dictators. They own a terrorist organization. The Obama era basically let Chavez run free, setting up their camps of socialism everywhere, and they didn't really do much to stop this thing from spreading, right? And I'm not blaming, I'm not trying to make this about Republicans or Democrats. I'm just trying to say there is a will right now in the ruling group in the United States to push this change through. I think they are likely the only country that has the political clout worldwide to push this change through. And so we as Venezuelans need to just take this for all it's worth, and have to and allow for this to happen. Like we need to. I think the next challenge for the Venezuelan transition is to show that we need military help.
Mm-hmm.
This can't be done by the Venezuelan. The Venezuelan people are going to get slaughtered if you ask them to keep protesting without military help.
Yeah.
Slaughtered. And that's going to be way worse. And so, does the international community need to see more death? Was the hundreds of people that got shot by the Maduro regime during their fraudulent elections not enough? Have the 30 people that have been dying in the last protests not been enough? You know, like, and so that's what I'm saying. Like, these people are criminals.
Mm-hmm.
We need what is her name? Delcy Rodriguez is like the right hand man of Maduro, the right hand woman of Maduro. She's been on TV saying that the food that the United States is sending to the border is carcinogenic.
Of course, propaganda.
And contaminated.
Yep.
And this is through the only broadly broadcasted network in Venezuela.
Yeah.
This makes North Korean news look balanced.
Yeah.
Like it's actually disgraceful that this is happening. And you know, for the longest time, I felt like, you know, I almost felt like the international community was just this pie in the sky of disappointment that never worked for anything. Mm-hmm. But after I see what's happening now, I regain my, call it my belief or my trust in the fact that it is everyone's problem, and we should take action together as a whole. And I hope the world can see past this U.S. being leading, because everything the U.S. leads, like Alejandro was saying on the Peter podcast, which that was brilliant. Anything the U.S.
Podcast,
thanks, man. Everything that the U.S. does is seen as a coup.
Yeah.
Nobody sees it as, oh, they're standing with the people. Everybody says they want the oil, they want the money. The U.S. doesn't need Venezuela's oil.
No. Do you know what's Canada's stance right now?
Yeah, Trudeau supports Guaido.
Okay.
Fully, openly. I'm very proud of that.
Mm-hmm.
Incredibly. I'm very proud of like everything that Canada has done. In fact, Canada was on the forefront of the sanctions even before. They did kind of follow suit when the president was recognized, but Canada has actually been in the forefront of this and calling these guys criminals for a while. So I'm very appreciative of that. And it seems like it's taken a long time to kind of see past the money that Chavez was throwing in all these events before. But, you know, it feels like the mask is finally down.
That's good.
So,
hopefully things will get resolved.
I hope so.
Yeah. Cool, man. I appreciate you talking, and this has been great. Thank you for sharing. If people want to get in touch with you, learn what you're doing with your company and startup, and if people want to help anything in Venezuela, what's the best way they can get in contact with you? Yeah, so our website is leden.io. You can reach out to me. There's a chat feature on the site that you can reach out to me on. My Twitter handle is Cryptonomista. We'll put it in the show notes if we can. Our company is Leden, and one of the cool things that we're going to roll out right now is a savings account that we're going to pilot in Venezuela. That's amazing, man. And we really feel like this can impact people's lives, like for the better. So can the lending, the Bitcoin-backed loans. It's just you need to have more of that asset accumulated for that to be really meaningful. But the Bitcoin savings account can really start helping you from day one. Mm-hmm. And so I'm very excited about that. If you want to help, I'm good friends with a lot of people doing great work in Venezuela. Randy Brito in Bitcoin Venezuela is a great person to contact. Happy to put you guys in touch, or anyone that's interested in touch with Randy. Alejandro at the Open Money Initiative, they're doing some really cool work and really trying to dig down how people in these countries use remittances and how we can very simply use Bitcoin as a vehicle to make things easier for them and not have them subject to these banks. And yeah, the last one is just reach out to me directly, Mauricio at leden.io, and very happy to share any info I can. Cool, man. Appreciate it. Thank you so much, man. Thanks you, man.